Once upon a time, in a world not so different from our own, there existed a kingdom ruled by a just and fair king. This kingdom was known for its prosperity and the happiness of its people. However, there was one thing that set it apart from all other kingdoms. It was protected by a powerful, ancient artifact known as the timekeeper's hourglass. This hourglass was said to have the power to control time itself. It was guarded by a chosen few, known as the timekeepers, who were tasked with keeping the hourglass safe and using its power for the good of the kingdom. One day, a terrible disaster struck the kingdom. A powerful sorcerer, jealous of the kingdom's prosperity, unleashed a magical curse upon it. Crops withered, rivers ran dry, and the people began to suffer. The king, in a desperate attempt to save his kingdom, called upon the timekeepers to use the hourglass to turn back time and prevent the curse from ever happening. The timekeepers, who were the most powerful and wise people in the kingdom, gathered to discuss how to use the hourglass. They knew that using the hourglass would not be easy, and that it could have severe consequences if not used properly. They also knew that they had only one chance to set things right. After much discussion and contemplation, they decided to take the risk and use the hourglass. They gathered around it and began to chant the ancient incantations that would activate its power. Suddenly, the hourglass began to glow with an otherworldly light. The timekeepers closed their eyes and focused all their energy on reversing the curse. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves back in time, just before the curse was unleashed. They immediately set to work, using their knowledge and power to stop the sorcerer and prevent the curse from happening. They succeeded in their mission and returned to the present, where they found the kingdom restored to its former glory. The king and his people were overjoyed and forever grateful to the timekeepers for saving them. The kingdom returned to its prosperity and the people lived in happiness once more. The timekeepers, meanwhile, continued to guard the hourglass and use its power for the good of the kingdom, ensuring that it would always be protected from harm. From that day on, the kingdom was known as the Kingdom of Time, and the story of the timekeepers and their heroic deeds became the stuff of legend, passed down through the generations. However, as the years passed, the people of the kingdom began to take the timekeepers and the hourglass for granted. They grew complacent and began to believe that they were immune to any harm or disaster. They stopped worshipping the timekeepers and instead, began to see them as mere myth and legend. The timekeepers, meanwhile, were growing old and tired. They knew that their time was running out and that they needed to pass on their knowledge and power to a new generation of timekeepers. They searched the kingdom for worthy successors, but they found none. The people had grown too arrogant and complacent to understand the true power and responsibility of the hourglass. One day, the sorcerer who had cursed the kingdom in the past returned, seeking revenge for his defeat. This time, he was even more powerful than before. He unleashed a new curse upon the kingdom, one that could not be undone by turning back time. The timekeepers, now weak and frail, knew that they could not stop the sorcerer alone. They knew that they had failed in their duty to protect the kingdom and the hourglass. They decided to make one final sacrifice and use the hourglass to send the kingdom and the hourglass to a place where they would be safe and where they would be remembered and respected. The sorcerer was defeated once again, but the kingdom and the hourglass were lost forever. The timekeepers, their mission complete, passed away, leaving behind a legacy of sacrifice and duty. The kingdom was never found again, but the story of the timekeepers and their heroic deeds lived on, passed down through the generations as a reminder of the true power and responsibility of time, and the importance of remembering and respecting those who guard it. But the legacy of the timekeepers and the hourglass did not die with them. The kingdom's people who was able to escape the curse, kept the memory of the timekeepers alive, and passed it down through the generations, as a reminder of the importance of the power of time, and the responsibility that comes with it. Years passed, and a new generation of timekeepers emerged. They were people who were chosen by the hourglass itself, people who had the power and wisdom to use the hourglass for the good of the kingdom. They were determined to bring back the kingdom and the hourglass, and to restore it to its former glory. The new timekeepers began their search for the kingdom, using all the knowledge and power they had inherited from the previous timekeepers. They faced many challenges and obstacles along the way, but they did not give up. They knew that their mission was important and that the fate of the kingdom was in their hands. After many years of searching, the new timekeepers finally found the kingdom. They were overjoyed and relieved to see that it was still intact, and that the hourglass was still safe. They immediately set to work, using their power and wisdom to lift the curse and restore the kingdom to its former glory. The kingdom's people were overjoyed and forever grateful to the new timekeepers for saving them. The kingdom returned to its prosperity and the people lived in happiness once more. The timekeepers, meanwhile, continued to guard the hourglass and use its power for the good of the kingdom, ensuring that it would always be protected from harm. But the new timekeepers knew that their work was not done yet. They knew that the sorcerer who had cursed the kingdom in the past was still out there, and that he would not rest until he had his revenge. They knew that they had to find a way to defeat him once and for all. The timekeepers began to research ancient texts and artifacts, looking for a way to defeat the sorcerer. They consulted with wise scholars and powerful sorcerers, hoping to find a solution. And finally, after many years of research, they discovered a powerful spell that would not only defeat the sorcerer but also banish him to an alternate dimension, where he would be unable to harm anyone ever again. The timekeepers knew that the spell was risky and that it would require a great sacrifice. They knew that they had to be the ones to cast the spell, as it could only be cast by someone with the power and wisdom of the timekeepers. The day of the final battle arrived, and the sorcerer appeared once again, determined to destroy the kingdom and the hourglass. The timekeepers, armed with their spell, stepped forward to face him. The sorcerer unleashed his full power, but the timekeepers were ready. They cast the spell, and the sorcerer was defeated, banished to the alternate dimension. The kingdom and the hourglass were safe once again, and the people were overjoyed. They knew that the timekeepers had sacrificed their lives to save the kingdom, and they would always remember and honor their sacrifice. The timekeepers passed away, but their legacy lived on. The kingdom continued to thrive, and the hourglass remained safe, guarded by a new generation of timekeepers, who knew the importance of their duty and the power of time. And the kingdom and its people lived in peace and prosperity, forever remembering the timekeepers and their heroic deeds. But the story doesn't end there. The timekeepers had left behind a powerful legacy, and the kingdom continued to be protected by their descendants. They were known as the guardians of time, and they were responsible for keeping the hourglass safe and using its power to protect the kingdom. The guardians of time were not only powerful sorcerers and wise scholars, but they were also chosen by the hourglass, just like the previous timekeepers. They were trained and educated in the ways of the hourglass, and they were sworn to protect the kingdom and its people at all costs. As the centuries passed, the guardians of time faced many challenges and dangers, but they always stood strong, using the power of the hourglass to keep the kingdom safe. They were not only respected but also revered by the people of the kingdom, who knew that the guardians of time were the only ones who could protect them from the dangers of the outside world. But one day, a new threat emerged. A powerful and evil sorcerer, who was jealous of the kingdom's prosperity and the power of the hourglass, decided to destroy the kingdom and take the hourglass for himself. He was more powerful than any sorcerer the guardians of time had ever faced before. The guardians of time knew that they had to act fast, as the sorcerer was getting closer to the kingdom every day. They gathered together and decided to use the power of the hourglass to create a powerful barrier around the kingdom, which would protect it from the sorcerer's attacks. They began to chant the ancient incantations, and the hourglass began to glow with an otherworldly light. The barrier was created, and the sorcerer's attacks were repelled. But the sorcerer was not one to give up easily, and he continued to attack the kingdom, determined to break the barrier and destroy the guardians of time. The guardians of time knew that they couldn't keep the barrier up forever, and they had to find a way to defeat the sorcerer once and for all. They knew that the only way to do this was to use the hourglass to travel back in time, and stop the sorcerer before he became powerful enough to attack the kingdom. They gathered around the hourglass and began to chant the ancient incantations. The hourglass began to glow with an otherworldly light, and the guardians of time were transported back in time. They found the sorcerer when he was still young, and they used all their power and knowledge to defeat him and prevent him from becoming the powerful sorcerer he was in the present. When they returned to the present, they found that the kingdom was safe and the sorcerer was gone. The people of the kingdom were overjoyed and forever grateful to the guardians of time for saving them once again. The guardians of time, meanwhile, continued to guard the hourglass and use its power for the good of the kingdom, ensuring that it would always be protected from harm. But even though the sorcerer was defeated, the guardians of time knew that their work was not done yet. They knew that the hourglass was a powerful and dangerous artifact, and it had to be kept safe at all times. They also knew that there would always be those who would seek to use its power for their own gain. So, the Guardians of Time decided to create a secret society, known as the Keepers of Time, whose sole purpose would be to protect the hourglass and ensure that it was only used for the good of the kingdom. They chose the most loyal and trustworthy people from the kingdom, and they trained them in the ways of the hourglass. The Keepers of Time became the guardians of the hourglass, and they were sworn to secrecy, never revealing their true identities to anyone outside of their society. They worked in the shadows, keeping the hourglass safe and ensuring that its power was only used for the good of the kingdom. Years passed, and the kingdom continued to thrive under the protection of the Keepers of Time. The people of the kingdom were happy and prosperous, and they never knew of the existence of the Keepers of Time. They believed that the Guardians of Time were still protecting them, not realizing that the true protectors were the Keepers of Time. But as with any secret society, the Keepers of Time faced many challenges and dangers. They had to keep the hourglass safe from those who would seek to use its power for their own gain, and they also had to keep their society a secret. But through it all, the Keepers of Time stood strong, and they continued to protect the hourglass and the kingdom for generations to come.